So let's take Fat Timmy. Fat Timmy wants to burn as much of his body fat as quickly as possible. It's time for him to refeed so he can keep his metabolism high, but he wants to know whether he should be refeeding on fat or carbohydrates. Well, the truth is, it depends on what you want. If you want to stay in ketosis, refeed on a high-fat meal. But if you want to get back to burning your own body fat as fast as possible, you actually want to refeed on carbs. Why is that the case? Let me explain. Now, in order to understand whether a carbohydrate meal of 2,500 calories or a fat-based meal of 2,500 calories is going to get Fat Timmy burning his own body fat as quickly as possible, we need to understand Timmy's liver, this bad boy. Fun fact about the liver, did you know that if there was a burglar surgeon that came around and stole 80% of your liver and left 20% remaining, that over the next 2 weeks, your liver would actually regrow from that 20% and create a whole new liver? Pretty amazing. So let's see what happens when Timmy has 2,500 calories of carbohydrates. Now the first thing to understand is that Timmy's blood sugar is probably sitting somewhere around 80 or 90. But when he eats all of these carbohydrates, his blood sugar is going to shoot way up, sometimes to numbers as high as 200. Now in general, your body likes to keep a blood glucose level around 80 or 90. So when you have all those carbohydrates, insulin comes into the blood and it needs to get the sugar out of your blood. Where does it put it? Well, one place that it puts it is in your muscles. And depending on how much muscle mass you have, you can store about 2,000 to 2,500 calories of carbohydrates in your muscles. So for Timmy, let's say it's about 2,000 calories of sugar that he can store in his muscles. Let's assume that he's just done a 3-day winter, he hasn't eaten for 3 days, and he did a bunch of exercise, and he depleted all of the glycogen that was in his muscles, and now he's refeeding on carbohydrates. So when Timmy eats these 2,500 calories of carbohydrates, his blood sugar spikes up. And then insulin comes in, and insulin helps to put this sugar in a bunch of different places. One place that it puts it is in the liver. But the liver can only store about 400 calories of the 2,500 calories that Timmy just ate. And that 400 calories is pretty much the same in everyone, not just Timmy. But what do we do with the remaining 2,100 calories? Well, those are going to go into his muscles. And Timmy's got about 2,000 calories worth of space, of glycogen space, in his muscles. So that's 400 that he stores in his liver and 2,000 that he stores in his muscles. That leaves 100 calories of carbohydrates to be turned into fat and stored as fat. Here's where it gets interesting. So it's actually really, really important that your body keeps some glucose in the blood. Now there's a whole bunch of tissues in the body that actually require glucose. One of these things is your brain. Now through the metabolic process of just being alive, this number is always depleting. So what does the body do about that? If this number goes too low, you're going to die. That's where the liver comes in. Now remember, Timmy has had all these carbohydrates, so he's storing about 400 calories in his liver. So what your liver does is really amazing. It uses that stored glycogen and releases it as it needs to keep your blood sugar stable. Now the question you need to be asking is, hang on, Steve. We need blood sugar to survive, and the liver is going to supply some, but the liver only has 400 calories that it can give. So what does it do when it gets to, say, 350 calories left? Well, this is where the magic really happens. And to show you that, we're going to need this board. Here I present the Board of Ketosis. So your liver is really, really smart, and it wants to maintain this blood glucose levels despite the fact that our body is constantly using glucose and depleting the glucose in our blood sugar. So what does the liver do? Well, it's really fascinating. As soon as the liver starts to lose glycogen, what it loses, it starts to take from fat. So within hours after eating, your liver is immediately losing glycogen, and it's having to make up for that loss by burning some of your fat. Now, while your liver is depleting in glucose, it's trying to make up for the difference by turning your fat into glucose. We call this gluconeogenesis. Now, as time goes on and your body runs, you're going to keep using that glucose, and the liver is going to have to put out more and more. But now look at this. We've only got 200 calories of glycogen left in the liver. And so what does the body do? Well, now it needs to burn even more fat to make up for the difference. And if you just sit there on your ass for 30 hours and don't do anything, you're going to have pretty much no glycogen left in your liver, and your liver will be solely using fat to maintain, to keep your blood glucose where it needs to be. And so this process right here is what getting into ketosis actually looks like. It's simply dependent on your hepatic glycogen, your liver glycogen levels. As it goes down, your liver has to turn to the substrate fat to make up for the difference. This is why it doesn't really make sense when people talk about being kicked out of ketosis. Ketosis is a sliding scale. Now, there are two big common misconceptions that people have. First of all, people think that you have to entirely deplete the liver before you can start burning your own fat. That's not true. As you can see, it's progressive. In fact, if you look at your urinalysis strips, look at it. There's no on or off switch. It's not like you're in ketosis or you're not. Are you burning a little bit of your fat or are you burning a lot? The other big myth is that you need to burn all the glycogen in your muscles. As you can see, this process happens even when you're sedentary. If you had to burn all the glycogen in your muscles, then your liver wouldn't really be able to do that trick and you'd wind up dead pretty quick. Truth is, your body doesn't really like to use the glycogen in your muscles. It's like a precious emergency fuel. Just as a bonus fact, even when you look at experienced athletes, they actually get really good at conserving the glycogen in their muscles and using fat for fuel until it comes time that they need that quick burst of energy. That's why some of the best marathon runners on the planet, after 2 hours of strenuous running, can sprint to the finish line. But let's not forget our original question, right? Fat Timmy wants to start burning his own body fat as quickly as possible. So you got to remember, when Timmy had those 2,500 calories of carbohydrates, 2,000 went into his muscles, 400 went into his liver, which immediately started to deplete, and 100 was stored on his belly as fat. Now let's compare this to when Timmy has 2,500 calories of fat. Well, because he hasn't eaten in 3 days, his liver is virtually empty, and he's using his own body fat to maintain his blood glucose. But now, he's going to eat 2,500 calories of fat. What happens? Well, he's not going to be eating any sugar, is he? So there's going to be nothing to fill up his liver. There's going to be nothing to fill up his muscles. Instead, he's just added 2,500 calories of fat to his system that he needs to burn before he can get back to burning the body fat that he had when he started. Now, if this was the case, why is everyone promoting high-fat refeeds? Pretty much because everyone gets distracted by this bad boy. Because the truth is that when Timmy's liver is 0, you're in deep ketosis. You're burning a lot of fat. When you go ahead and eat a whole bunch of fat, this doesn't change. You stay in ketosis, which comforts everybody. When you refeed on carbohydrates, even though it's going to be way faster before you're burning your own body fat again, carbohydrates bring with them a lot of water weight. For every gram of glycogen that you store in your muscles, 3 grams of water comes along. It's not really going to change your appearance, but it will change the number on the scale. As a result, everyone has carbs and thinks that they're putting on lots and lots of fat. And to make matters worse, their pee strips go really, really light, which tells them that they're not in fat burning mode anymore. As a result, everyone's scared of literally the best fuel, the best refeeding option if your goal is to eat and then be back to burning your own body fat as quickly as possible. Okay, so to summarize, whether or not you're in ketosis is entirely dependent on your liver glycogen levels, which naturally deplete over time. In which case you might be asking the question, how can I make my liver glycogen levels deplete faster? And this is where I have one really cool trick. Remember that our liver is trying to keep our blood glucose high. So if we can figure out ways of using as much blood glucose as we can as quickly as possible, then our liver is going to empty much faster and we're going to start burning our own body fat as quickly as possible. So if remember Fat Timmy and he's had a whole bunch of carbohydrates, his muscles are now full. And you might say, well, you go out and do some exercise. But the truth is that exercise doesn't just pull glucose from the liver, it's also pulling glucose from your muscles as well, which we don't really care about, right? So what's something you can do that will target liver glycogen, hepatic glycogen exclusively? The answer is actually pretty cool. Sudoku. See, now your brain is one of those things that takes glucose, that is using up that glucose in your blood. It consumes about 0.3 per minute, unless you're doing something that's cognitively challenging, in which case you can get your brain to burn up to 2 calories per minute. That's 120 calories in 1 hour. Now 120 calories in an hour in a liver that can only store 400 is going to drastically increase the rate at which you deplete your liver glycogen and you get to maximum fat burning mode as quickly as possible. So there you have it. That's the ultimate fat burning strategy. Now that stereotype kind of makes sense, right? You know, the nerdy guy who's sitting at his computer coding all day, but he's really skinny. How is he so skinny if he's just sitting at a computer all day? Well, now you know. He's using his brain like crazy. Now, if a computer programmer is sitting at his computer and he's completely absorbed by what he's doing because his brain power is through the roof, he's not going to be eating any food, which means that he's going to just be constantly depleting his liver glycogen, which means that he's going to be in fat burning mode. So what should Fat Timmy do? He should eat a whole bunch of carbohydrates and then some crossword puzzles.